Hello, and welcome to the Indy Author Podcast. Today, my guest is JP Rindfleisch. Hey, JP, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing great, and I am happy to welcome you back to the podcast and to give our listeners a little reminder of who you are. JP Rindfleisch the Ninth writes queer cozy fantasy and dark paranormal academy. He is best known for Mandrake Manor and Mosswood Apothecary, which started as serials and were later novelized, including a successful Kickstarter for Mosswood Apothecary's special edition. JP also founded the Rockford Area Writers, an 80-plus member community supporting local authors in the Rockford, Illinois area, and is an editor on Dialogue Doctor with Jeff Elkins, another frequent visitor to the podcast.
Yeah.
And JP joined me back in episode 223, The Tolling Bell and the Story Hypothesis. And so the reason I invited JP back is that I was looking for information on serialization and I was casting about among my previous guests. And Jeff suggested that JP would be a great person to talk with, as you can tell he would be based on his bio. And so we're going to be talking about serializing fiction.
Mhm.
And I wanted to start right out, JP, asking you, why did you decide to pursue serialization?
Yeah, so it ended up being sort of a weird path because I had started most of my author career co-writing the Leah Ackerman series, which is a novel, which became a series. And then Kindle Vella came into existence. And at that time, I was good friends with Christine Daigle, and she messaged me and she said, "Hey, you want to do a podcast about serials?" And I was like, "Of course I do. Why wouldn't I?" And so then we started reaching out to people we knew and we asked if they were planning on writing a serial. And one of those people was Jeff Elkins, and he said, "No, but you wanna write one together?" And I was like, "Of course I do, why not?" Because I was very much in my "yes, of course," or the "yes, and" stage of writing.
Yes.
So, we wrote Nerds together, and I really liked the process that we had with serialization. I think that some people get this, and I was definitely one of those, where the first draft of a novel is so daunting. And just like the fact of writing the whole draft and like the whole desire you have is having had that draft written. And then once it's done, then you realize, oh no, there's a ton more work to do. But when you write serials, you just do everything chapter by chapter and you don't screw up. That's the plan. So I realized that with Nerds, with working with Jeff and sort of seeing the story structure unfold as we were writing it, and really feeling confident in the fact that what we started with had remained concrete by the time we ended it, and that I could repeat that myself. So then I did 3 other serials at that point, and now that's pretty much my writing process.
Well, there are all sorts of things to ask about there.
Yeah.
Um, so one is that the landscape of serialization is changing a lot. So Kindle Vella, popular for a time, no longer around. Radish is another serialization platform that is no longer around. So do you have any sense about whether the retirement of some of the serialization platforms is reflective of reader interest or just business decisions? What's your take on that?
Honestly, like, I don't know, but at the same time, I can see that, like, Kindle Vella put a lot of money into it, but I don't know the background stuff. I don't know what Amazon was making those decisions on, and I don't know if they either put more money in it and they just didn't reach their metrics, and that's why they decided to close. But I do know that in terms of, like, author success and, like, the authors that I know who have moved on to make novels that were in Kindle Vella, like, there are a significant few of us that really gained a footing through the serialized platform and being able to get money out of it basically. And in a positive way, like the readers, and then also there was the bonus program, which to my knowledge, there is no other program that exists that did that. And so that was such a huge jump up. And to see that gone is sort of sad. But I think that at the same time, Amazon has always tried weird things. I can't remember all of them, but there was one where it was like shared universes that they tried to do for a while and several things. So I think that they like to ebb and flow, and I don't know where their business decisions come from that. But I think that in terms of web novels and sort of that aspect of things, it's super popular in Eastern countries, and it sort of flows into Western countries. And I'm curious if it's sort of been doing this ebb and flow, and then it might steadily sort of surf in or whatever sort of water analogy you want to use there. But I feel like some of those other platforms, Wattpad and Royal Road, aren't going away. And we use Patreon, we use Substack, we use all of these things that you can use serialized discussions, whether or not it's a fiction or it's, your ongoing life updates or something along those lines, where people love to take those in And so it's sort of finding the readers where you can, and unfortunately putting yourself in those specific platforms, you always run the risk of them going away.
Yeah, one of the things that Amazon retired that I was sad to see go is Kindle short reads. There's another one that's short story related, but that I think is still around. But yeah, I don't think that like I wouldn't want somebody to find out that Kindle short reads, which was short stories that had gone away, and think that short stories wasn't the way to go. Similarly,
Yeah.
with Kindle Vella going away, don't assume that serialized fiction is going away. It's just a business decision they made.
Yeah,
And I have
exactly.
a speculation about what effect the increasing popularity of platforms like Substack and so on might have done to contribute to that. But I want to hold the discussion about the platforms a little bit
Mhm.
and talk a little bit about what you were looking for when you decided to pursue serialization. So some of it was like an opportunity would drop serendipitously into your lap, and you said yes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
of course. But were there other things that you really saw a benefit of serialization that you weren't maybe getting when you thought about longer works?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the accountability. The proximity to the reader when it comes to serialized fiction, when you have an audience, is bar none to, a novel, because people are with you as you're developing the story. Now, it depends on how you write. Maybe you serialize the whole thing and then you're sort of giving out installments as you go, but the story's already written. But that wasn't how I did things. I definitely was, chomping at the bit, maybe because, who knows why. But what I really learned from that was, if I am able to sort of develop a story publicly, then the feedback can sort of drive the story, and I'm more than happy to do that. So one of my favorite things was, because Mosswood Apothecary became one of the more popular ones on Kindle Vella, and I would get comments after I posted, an episode, and they would be questions like, "Man, it was really interesting that you went to this town, and I really want to know more history there." And I was like, "Well, we're here for another couple more chapters, so why not add in a little more world building?" And then to see people respond to that positively was just such a good drive for me as a author, to know, like, what people are interested in when they're reading these kinds of stories and what sort of things they would want to see. There was also like poll opportunities. So like, hey, there's gonna be some weird spirit creature coming and, running through the town. What do you want it to be? And I can sort of just do A, B, C, D, and, they can vote on it, and then I'll pick the one that they want. And it doesn't really change the trajectory of my story, but it allows that involvement that I would have never had in writing a novel. And so I really had that sort of connection on Kindle Vella, and now I feel like that is an opportunity to do on a Patreon or Substack, where you have followers or even your own website. And that's sort of like my next phase, as I'm trying to build up on my own website, sort of like a Patreon-esque platform.
So yeah, I'm definitely someone who would have to have the whole serial done before number one. And it's very interesting. I mean, I think what you're talking about is the opportunity, among other things, for sort of market research within the
Mhm.
genre you're writing in, and
Yeah.
getting that, you not only benefit from just the commitment that people feel when they're contributing to a story that you're writing, but also just that sense of like, oh, they like A better than B. Like, what can I, as an author, as a publisher, as a marketer, learn about that?
Yeah. And I think too, like, so to jump on the Clifton Strengths boat that a lot of people are on, I have high ideation input and intellection. And I realized recently too that in my earlier writing career, I would do a lot of world building, and I would build entire worlds from start to finish and have a lot of detail, and then never write the story. Because for me, I had satisfied whatever that well was that I needed. And I think in this instance, I'm finding that having that interaction with people is sort of revitalizing the well as I move along, and it's sort of helping me to craft that story. So maybe people in the same boat who have those as higher strengths might see this as the sort of path that they might want to try.
Did you ever find yourself in a circumstance where the readers were clamoring for you to go in a certain way, and it was creatively difficult, or it was a direction that you didn't particularly want to go, or any challenge like that?
So when I write, I have sort of these pillars of like where I want the story to be in the next 5 chapters, 10 chapters, 20, etc. And I always plan on going there. There may be times where someone's like, "Oh no, XYZ happened," and I'm upset about it. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, that's how the story's going, and we're just
Yeah.
gonna keep going down this path. but it's the instances where people are interested in something, and I know that it takes just a tiny little tweak or a little bit of adding to the story as opposed to a complete diversion. I still like, I don't know what it is, but maybe like masochism or something, but I like the fact that I can sort of drive the story and cause the emotional response, because regardless, I don't wanna appease the readers to every whim that they want. I wanna sort of have them have the emotional responses that I want, and to be able to see that in the comments is sort of helpful
Yeah.
by far.
I remember a reader of my first Anne Kinnear suspense novel, spoiler alert, saying that a very expensive emerald engagement ring gets put in a can of paint, and at the end, the can of paint gets thrown away, and the woman says, "Can you have the ring found in the next book?" And I was like, "No, the ring is pretty much gone.
Yeah, yeah, it's gone.
It's gone." Have you ever found that the story became well, let me ask it this way. Did you plan in advance how long you wanted the serial to be? And then did you have to adjust it as you went along if people were saying, "Oh, I really want to know more about this world," and now you have to spend a couple of installments talking about the world that maybe you didn't foresee?
Yeah, so for me, how I write, how I've found the current process that I'm using, because I do think that all process sort of evolves over time. And the current process I'm doing is I will outline the entire thing from start to finish with sentences for each chapter. And then when I go to sit down that chat for that chapter, I will sort of tease out what the summary is of it, what the beats are, and sort of keep building and building and building until I have that chapter ready to go. But my plan always is to break the outline I have. I don't know why, but it's sort of like, "Oh, you made these rules, let me figure out how to break them." And regardless, I always have the pillars, like and I still view them as like in the next 5 to 10, and so I give myself that leeway. I wanna still hit this emotional thing. I still want this event to happen, or I still want these characters to do this specific thing on their emotional journey. But regardless of how long it takes there, yeah, that's fine. If I need to add another chapter because someone brought up, "Hey, I wanna see more of this," and I know how to weave it in, yeah, I'm more than happy to just sort of put that little space in there, and that doesn't really impact the story in the same way. But yeah, that's sort of my weird process, is like, I almost intentionally try to break the outline, and I have to, like, rewrite the outline a couple of times, but I still know the range of how many chapters it's going to be, give or take, like, 10 to 20.
And when you start the serial, do you have a pretty clear idea of where you want it to end? Or is
Yes.
that morphing? Oh, you do? Okay.
I I I can, it's almost like I can visualize the last point, like when the movie fades to black, basically. And that almost never changes. There may be like, a little moment afterwards, maybe a little cliffhanger afterwards or something, but there's like always this moment I'm writing towards, and that almost never changes.
So you are inserting an entirely other dimension here when you're co-writing. It's like you
Mhm.
have innumerable co-writers because you have your co-author, the official co-author whose name shows up on the cover. And then you have a lot of co-authors who are the followers who are saying, "Oh, I
Yeah.
really want to find out more
Yeah.
about this." So do you feel like your process is very difficult because of that official co-author than it would be if you were doing this individually?
So with Nerds, we didn't get a lot of that community thing because it was one of the earlier ones, so we were still building the community. So I haven't really experienced the moment of like co-authoring a serial as, you're getting that feedback, because both Mandrake, Manor, and Mosswood I had written without a co-author. So I don't have the sort of like two things merged together.
Um, so a takeoff of your comment about like building the community is, do you feel like serialization works best for authors who already have a following? Or do you think that you can build a following through serialization?
I would say the latter. I would say, of course, to those that want it, to be wary of the platforms you're on, as someone who was on Kindle Vella and it disappeared. But I also, with Christine Daigle, we were doing the serial fiction show for about a year. And during that time, we interviewed authors who already had platforms, who were already traditionally published authors. And we also had authors who this was the first thing that they've done and that they built this community and this following out of. And we've seen them continue to grow on success and to continue to build their audiences. I think that it is very difficult to build an audience on a platform of your own, but at the same time, like, a way to funnel people to that platform is like the key. So, for example, like being able to be on a place like Wattpad, like Tapas, like Kindle Vella, if it had existed now, and then bring people to you through other means would be ideal. Now, of course, you have to follow terms and conditions wherever you are. You can't always be like, hey, come to my website and I'm going to give you the link, because sometimes the websites don't like that when you do that. But I think that there are ways to encourage people through social media, through other means.
So, can you describe a little bit about the platforms that you're aware of out there, the ones you assessed for yourself, what made you choose the ones you chose, and then a little bit about your move as you're describing to moving more to your own platform?
Yeah, yeah. So started on Kindle Vella mostly because monetary reasons. It made sense to have sort of the, pay for what you put up there. Wattpad's great for people who want to give away a free story or sort of want to build the audience. I just didn't have that at the time. I was looking to sort of go in the full-time direction. And then while I was having success with Mosswood Apothecary, I was reached out by Tapas, which is a webtoon or web novel platform that is really popular in Eastern, that is bringing more and more stuff over into like the Western culture. And they reached out. They wanted to acquire Mosswood Apothecary, but it was having a lot of success over on Kindle Vella. So I pitched them another story. They took it and they made it their like premium story. So that helped me sort of jump the line, quote unquote, because they reached out to me to become one of their premium authors. So Tapas has like 3 tiers for people. If you just joined today, your story would be entirely free. Then once it starts to gain some traction, you can use ad revenue, and then you can become a premium author where certain episodes after a certain number are priced at like their Inc, which is a token platform or a tokenized system. So yeah, I pitched them that story. I wrote that. It's 66 chapters, and actually, I think a week ago, the last chapter had finally posted. And one of the things with Tapas and why I was so interested in them is they're more in the realms of like manga and anime, and so they have more of that vibe. And the stories that I write, the cozy queer fantasy, that's a little bit less spicy and more like heartwarming, has the potential to be in that realm. And one of the things that they said was that they would start to try and push for sort of subsidiary rights. So I'm curious to see where that goes. It would be really nice if it did go there. If it doesn't, it's fine. But that's why I ended up going with them, because they had reached out. I looked into their platform, and they are a very renowned platform for sort of that serialized fiction.
You had said
Absolutely.
webtoons. Can you describe what you mean by webtoons?
Yeah, so webtoons are like web comics. So Stand Still, Stay Silent is one that I know of because that was one I used to read. But back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when you go on a website and maybe that day or that week, the artist would have posted sort of a comic page for the day. And then, whatever time frame, another one releases. And so that was serialized comics, web comics, and they could go on for years. And so this was sort of like an aggregated platform, or they would acquire artists and they would do the artist or comic version of that. And now recently in the past couple of years, they're now doing that for serialized fiction or for web novels, which is the same thing, same verbiage. So now they're a platform that does both comics and novels on one site.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I took you away from the follow-on. You were talking
No, no,
about
you're fine.
tapas and
Yeah, so ultimately, yeah, I ended up going with Tapas. Other options was Radish, but that is now closing. There is Royal Road, Patreon, Substack, your own website, Ream. And then we also have Later Press, which is another really good one. That one, you sort of own your web page on Later Press. So like I have one that's like, I think mosswood.laterpress.com. And so you can send people to that. They can buy the entire serial or subscription to it, and then you sort of release on time. But it's sort of like your own facing content, but you don't have a lot of like editing controls of that website. But then they will do like feature programs on their main page. So that was a good one that was developed by an author who was on Kindle Vella. So it was developed by authors for authors, which was really nice.
do you find that you pick up mainly people who are following along the serial as it goes? Or how many people wait until it's all done? Like, I never start a
Yeah.
series on TV until it's done because I'm afraid that, like, I don't want to wait between installments, as an example. Do you find you're still picking people up even after the series has been completed?
Well, I would say that especially on like the Tapas platform, so I do have to kind of use them because that's where my stuff is. So it's the best example I would have. but they have a totally different marketing plan when the story ends, and it sort of gets entered into other things to sort of drive its continued existence. Whereas when it releases on a weekly schedule, there are updates that say like, "Hey, this Saturday these episodes come out," and so it's almost like a TV program, but for your chapters that come out. So it's really cool. It's really interesting, and so you can like sort of follow which ones you want, and then sort of look at your schedule of which things are going to release. And then they shift things over when it becomes a completed story, and it sort of pushes out into their other version or their other marketing scheme, which is for completed stories. And I do see that there's sort of this continued drive of new readers once the story has been finished, but it has been a pretty consistent flow other than the immediate release where they do a really big incentive for people to start reading. And so there's a really heightened push for it to get more eyes on it as well.
So it sounds like one of your goals is certainly income generation.
Yeah.
Is that your primary goal? Like if you had to rank all the things you're getting out of serialized fiction, where would that stand in relation to like community building or how do those goals rank
Yeah,
for you?
yeah. So, I mean, when I started writing serials, I was still in the day job and I was sort of looking for how can I write stories and get some kind of income and build an audience, all of the things at once, basically, because, I wanted to do the full-time thing at some point. And Kindle Vella was a great thing. And now I would say isn't really anything I know of that has that sort of bonus program that Kindle Vella had, and that made a huge difference. That was like I had a couple of months where I almost met the pre-tax of my current salary at the time. So I was like, "Okay, this might be a real thing."
Yeah.
But what it did do for me was it helped me finish a story and helped me know that people wanted it, and it helped me alter those stories into novels that I could then start selling afterwards. And so I will continue using this process of sort of publishing the chapter by chapter and then sort of converting that into the finished novel and sort of revitalizing the product as we move along the line. But yeah, that was sort of, I guess my goal was initially like income and community, and it was pretty even.
So when you think about moving to a platform that you have more control over, how would your approach change to accommodate that?
Well, when you control it, now you have to market it, right? So the big thing is marketing, and I wanna make sure that there's enough content on there before I really push for the marketing. Right now, I'm mostly focused on TikTok Shop and finalized novel products, and so this is sort of one of those things that I need to start pushing and working on once I get the current project that I'm working on completed, and then I start working on the next one. But yeah, the big thing is once you own it, now you have to be the one that shouts about it because no one else is gonna shout about it. And so it becomes a little bit more difficult than when it's on something like Kindle Vella, and then you can have that visibility if you end up with your story on, like, say, the top 250 or something.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think that most of the sort of general author marketing and promotion advice I hear is very much focused on usually book, novel length works and usually fiction.
Yeah.
And are you finding like is that information that you can tap into? Is there some information that you have to just ignore entirely? Do you have to tweak it in order to appeal to and find the fans of serialized fiction?
Yeah, I mean, so when it was Kindle Vella, I was able to do Facebook ads, and that was a reasonable thing because of the sort of the cost of ad versus the revenue earned. But nowadays, the options outside of owning your own, say, Patreon is a little difficult because some of the price differences can be significantly lower or sort of that revenue. So the promotion side of it is really for me to try and push towards people to my website so that they can find the serials and then they can find the other products as well. And so that's sort of my next phase. Right now, I'm really focused on doing the social media push and really getting the attention that way. And that's working for the novels, and then I'll start shifting it more towards the membership side.
Would you always go into a serialization project with the expectation that in the end it would become a standalone novel?
Yes-ish. I think it would depend on if the serialized project reaches the people I want it to reach, makes it accessible to the people I want it to reach. Because that's another thing is, the visibility. People that read serialized fiction or webtoons on Tapas are probably not necessarily going to be finding your novels on, say, Amazon or on websites because they have the platform that's tried and true, the one that they like to read from. So it's finding a completely different audience. The Tapas project, that is a premium project, I can't touch until the contract ends or whenever that is. And so it will remain a serial with the idea that maybe they will obtain subsidiary rights, which would be great for it. So even then, I think my mindset is that I would love to see it iterate into something new. And I think that that's always been my goal is I always want the intellectual property I have to be more than one thing, because how else are you going to reach everybody that you want to reach?
Yeah. In your review of contracts of various platforms, can you think of any sort of red flags that if somebody were pursuing this, you would advise them to watch out for?
Not legal advice because I'm not a lawyer, but I would be very aware of what they own and how long they own it and when you can end said thing. I went into the top and what they may ask of for your next IP project as well. I think that one's really important too. Right of first refusal, yeah,
Yep.
that's it. Because you don't want to get into a place where they have to look at the next thing that you write too, because then, you're sort of stuck in that situation as well. And this was sort of another thing that I looked into because I'd recently obtained a literary agent as well who is helping me with subsidiary rights. And so they also have sort of divvied out, here are the things that you want to see, here are the things that you don't want to see. And it's been really nice and really helpful. Always like the second opinion on those.
So, as a final question, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to switch from all this business stuff to craft. And
Yeah.
so, if someone has experience with novel length works, but they're very intrigued by this idea of serialization for all the reasons you've said, do you have a couple of craft tips you'd want to share with them about if you're making that change, what kind of different mindset do you have to bring to working on a serialized
Yeah.
offering?
Yeah. So this is tough because novels are not necessarily serials and serials aren't necessarily novels. And so the serials are installments of an overall story and they have an arc. That arc can be extremely long. If you think about like mangas or anime, I think there's a show called One Piece and it has hundreds, like 600 plus episodes or something along those lines. And that's sort of what a serial is intended, quote unquote, to be. It's supposed to be this ongoing, long running project with little arcs that continue to build into bigger and bigger arcs and all of these pieces. So one of those things is thinking about how can your story, how the longevity of your story and the opportunity for more. And I think that, I at least think about that in my all of my writing is like, how can the story continue? What is the little thread that I can lead at the end of a quote season or the end of a book that might lead into the next one if people are interested in it? Because like the Tapas project ended at 66 chapters, but there is a clear opportunity for a quote season 2. And I call it the seasons because I think of it a lot like TV shows, and I'm thinking more of the like TV shows like Supernatural or Charmed, where you have these little arcs, these little like there's a monster or a demon or something to face or whatever that is, and it sort of gets resolved within the episode or within, 3 episodes or whatever that is. There's also a big overarching arch, and that's mostly in all storytelling as well. But craft wise, all of that to say, each chapter has an estimated word length that you want to sort of stick to. For me, from Mosswood Apothecary, I would say that my chapter lengths were between 1,400 and 2,000 words. And I didn't really deviate from that. And one of the reasons is that when you think about serialized fiction, especially if people are paying per installment, that they sort of begin to get an expectation of how long your chapters are going to be. And so when you think about a novel, you can have a 700 word chapter, you can have a 4,000 word chapter, and people are fine with it because they're just like, as long as the pacing is fine, I'm good. But when it comes to serialized fiction and when it becomes these installments, you have to think about it in terms of how does this chapter or this episode look in terms of a single unit, and how does it contribute to the rest of your story as well? And when serials get converted into novels, one thing that I've noticed is that people say that it almost reads a little faster because there's almost this expectation of how long chapters are. So you get this sort of this pace going on. So maybe it helps in terms of that, in terms of how to write novels. But yeah, I don't know if that was a big craft tip or what, but that's sort of how I think about serials. Is there are these installments, there are these little arcs that happen, and I can go into a little more detail if you want, especially with like nerds if you'd like.
Well, the thing that made me think of is that with a novel, there are all sorts of sort of rhythms that you need to comply with. And so every chapter of a novel doesn't necessarily have the same kind of rhythm
Yeah.
that a complete story would. And there are going to be periods where maybe you've just had a lot of chapters with a lot of action, and now you have to like give the reader a little breather. And so you're having one that's more like calm. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It's a different beast. And you couldn't really do that with serialization. Like nobody wants to get to the as installment of the serial where it's all just calm and nothing really happens.
Right. Well, so yes-ish. If you're writing a cozy, and this is the weird one, is like when you're writing a cozy fantasy, there are moments of the breathers, but even the breather moment, whatever it is, because I had my characters, they went on a picnic together, sort of having this moment of like, okay, calm before the storm, because I knew that we needed that breather. But I also knew that at the time of publishing, this was going to be released 1 week before the next one and 1 week after the other one. So the people have like a 2 week window, and this one has to suffice as its own thing. It can't just be
Yeah.
like, okay, guys, I'm ready for the next one, like, or I'm gonna stop reading now, or something along those lines. We see this in like mangas or in anime as well. Like in Naruto, there are a lot of what they call filler episodes. People don't like them. Sometimes they tell people to skip them, but they can be these moments of respite where, the characters go to like a hot spring, or where they sort of have this like breather moment. And I do think that there is the opportunity to use those filler episodes correctly to give your readers that breath and to give them something a little new and a little different, but you don't want to bore them. So that is the big thing.
So you would mention nerds. Give a
Yeah.
little bit of background on what lessons you learned or lessons you'd like to share from nerds,
Yeah,
what it
so
is.
Nerds National Recently Deceased Services. It's a queer paranormal comedy, and it's the serial I wrote with Jeff. And we really focused on it being like Ghostbusters meets The Office slash Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it's just a silly, goofy, fun time. And there was sort of a cadence and a flow to it. So it was sort of expected that every 3 to 5 episodes, we would have an episode where they were in the office, where there was just a big cast scene, and so they're all sort of talking to each other. They're all, angry about the reports that they have to write, and like they're getting ready for their next report. But it is an expectation that we started to put in place that every 5 chapters we would have that. Every 5-ish chapters. So you can see that like we would have this big cast scene, we would have then a ghost hunting scene. Something where they have to resolve a localized problem. And more than likely it was a haunting at a house, and they would have to figure out what the problem was and then help the ghost or capture the ghost, whatever it was. But it was a small contained unit of an event that they needed to take care of. And then we would have sort of a relationship building or like a close proximity type of scene where it wasn't the full cast, but it was, our main character for season 1, who is Ethan, who is a brand new agent on this force. And he may be dealing with another agent, or he may be going to see his grandmother and his sister, but it's something that sort of anchored the emotion as well. And we sort of ebbed and flowed through that. Now, every 10 chapters, there would be an overarching arc that we were sort of taking care of. In Nerds, the big thing was that they discovered that there were, I think, like 4 children spirits, and they needed to resolve whatever their issue was and like help them move on. And then there was like a big political arc that took place in the whole thing that we would then have to sort of sprinkle in as well. And so there is sort of this like cadence with the localized, big cast event or investigation, and then like a relationship building. Then there was an arc every 10 to resolve a child spirit thing. And then there was the big arc of the political, big over small town thing that we had going on.
Oh my goodness. And you were doing all that with another author in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. And all we were doing was trying to make each other laugh.
Well, that sounds like a lovely the underlying goal, the underlying impetus is making
Yeah.
each other laugh for that kind of story. So that's great. JP, it's always lovely to talk to you. And
Yeah.
please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Well, you can head on over to shop.jprindfleischix.com, and I will spell that out, jprindfleischix.com. It's a word salad of a website, and you can find out more about me there.
Great. Thank you so much.